The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast host and guest and do not necessarily represent those of our distribution partners, supporting business relationships, or supported audience. Welcome to Transacting Value, where we talk about practical applications for instigating self-worth when dealing with each other and even within ourselves, where we foster a podcast listening experience that lets you hear the power of a value system for managing burnout, establishing boundaries, fostering community, and finding identity. My name is Josh Porthouse. I'm your host, and we are redefining sovereignty of character. This is why values still hold value. This is Transacting Value.
It just felt like I was always going 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And after a while, if you don't have the proper values and the proper foundation and a good belief system or hope or faith or love, you don't get through.
Today on Transacting Value, how to pivot when you need to. How can traveling and immigrating to a new country or even a new culture help to navigate uncharted life circumstances? And what role do those experiences have on our own self-worth for lasting, life-transforming habits? Alongside human behavior specialist and entrepreneur coach Anne-Marie Thrives, we're getting unstuck through value systems that resonate inside and out. I'm Josh Porthouse. I'm your host. And from SDYT Media, this is Transacting Value. Anne-Marie, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's great to
Absolutely.
meet you.
Oh, you as well. You've got such a wild story. It's hard to believe that you're one person of all the things you've been through. And I want to hit as much of it as we can, but I think the smoothest way to do this is to let you open us up. So just take a couple minutes for me. Who are you? Where are you from? Those kinds of things. But what kinds of things in life are shaping your perspective now? Who are you?
So my name is Anne-Marie, and I was born in Italy, and we immigrated here when I was 7. And, it was really tough when we got here because everything was different. The food, the people, the environment. I lived in a very coastal town right on the water, and we weren't landlocked, but we were way 5 minutes from the ocean versus 25 minutes from the ocean. I just remember one time when I was little, how Italians sometimes they'll do like a little siesta in the afternoon. And I remember grabbing a bag, like one of those bags that you put groceries in, the plastic bags. I got to catch myself. And it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. I put a knife in there, put on my jellies, and walked down to the ocean. Started cutting up the sea urchins on the rocks, and I just sat there with my lemon and I ate them, and I went back home and nobody even knew I was gone.
Oh, wow.
That's how close to the ocean we were.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why that came up, but different days now. And just having to be in school and not knowing anything, sitting in the back of the classroom, like I would be in the classroom as part of the group during parts of the day, and then other parts of the day still in the classroom, but in the back being tutored with flashcards. And so, when kids don't understand things or we don't understand things, there was a lot of bullying going on because obviously my parents don't speak the language either. Then when they did, they had this wicked accent, and then the whole culture being different. We didn't celebrate the same holidays that we did here. And Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays now. And so we didn't have that. So trying to be like everybody else and making a turkey and pumpkin pie and stuff like that, but just generally not fitting in because we were just so different, but trying to fit in at the same time. So, it's just all of these. So then you go from one school to another, and it's just constantly trying to find the people that, water finds its own level, just finding the people. And for me, it was 1 and 2, and that's it. Those were my buddies for life. One of them passed away a few years ago, and it's just as you go through life, people are there, then they're not, and you have to have those pivots.
Hmm.
Then, in my early 20s, I got into a very bad accident. I had just finished, I got my degree in business administration and management. And I just got this new job. I'd been a temp and they were going to, take me on full time. My insurance and everything, all my benefits kicked in October 1st and October 20th. Slam, I am paralyzed for quite some time, have a traumatic
Oh,
brain injury, have to learn how to talk, how to just live life again. But the neat thing was, because I like to look at the silver lining through everything, was, having that insurance that was way better than what I had before. I was able to be in a private room because sometimes when you're in that amount of pain or you have a brain injury, for me, it was a lot of headaches,
hmm,
migraine, not being able to handle noise and sensory things around me. And so I was able to be put in a private room as part of my insurance. So those are the things I kind of look at. A few years later, got back on my feet, and it happened again. I think somebody ran a stop sign or something.
wow.
And yep, and so different parts got injured, and just kind of moving through life, taking care of my dad, having my friend that I spoke of. Her name was Chris. She was a physician's assistant, and while he was here with the disease that he had, it was like having a 24/7 nurse, because she had hurt her elbow and was convalescing, and so her sleep pattern was a little crazy. So I
Yeah.
had her around the whole time, and then my dad passed, and a couple months later, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So, you
Jeez.
know, yeah, I actually was on a podcast because somebody had heard about what I've been through life,
Yeah.
and it was, you can't make this shit up. She's like, I think you're
Fitting.
my gal. I know, and so, but I just look at them at things that happened for me, instead of things that happened to me. There periods of anger, and like, where's God in my pain? Where's God? Period. You know,
Hmm.
just going through those emotions, because it just felt like I was always going 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And after a while, if you don't have the proper values and the proper foundation and a good belief system or hope or faith or love, you don't get through. And
Yeah.
I feel like those were the things that got me through. Those values that got instilled in me when I was little, sometimes they were distorted, but as you grow in life, you start to grasp onto the things that matter, and it helps you to live a fuller life. And I, through all of these things, wanted to teach other people how to go through these. It's not the end of the world, even through death. Having lost, I think, one year we lost 18 people in 17 months, including my father, his brother, just a lot of key people. My friend, Chris, who was the physician's assistant, and my high school buddy.
Wow.
So, yeah. So it's like all of these key people that, you go to for life's help are now gone, and they're not there anymore. And then with
Mm,
COVID, I noticed, even for myself, a lot of people had to pivot, whether they wanted to or not.
hmm.
They found themselves in a different position. Maybe their position was eliminated. Maybe they lost people that they cared for. Um, and just the whole crisis in general, I think, left a lot of people stuck and unable to really move, just out of fear. Because none of us knew what was going to happen, or how things were going to turn out. And we had to turn to other things and maybe try to trust other things that we normally wouldn't trust before. It's like, for a lot of people, being online is a big deal,
Hmm.
so learning new technologies and community. I think there's a lot of controversial stuff that goes with COVID, but
Yeah.
again, I'm always looking for that silver lining. So I'm looking at the fact that, maybe your grandmother couldn't talk to you before, but now, just talk to her, but now you could talk to her and see her because, she figured out how to get on Zoom or FaceTime something. Um,
Yeah.
so I like to help people that have been through, big traumas, big shifts in life, constant. I feel that there's a certain mindset that we need to have to go through life, like a thriving mindset that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay, and to have that hope. And when you don't have it, you don't have that mental agility to, kind of be like Gumby and just bend, so that
Mhm.
you can do the things you need to do, to get out of that place. Like when I got into my accident, it was like, all right, this is where I am right now. Where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? What steps do I need to take to get there? And so throughout my life, I feel like I've been asking myself the same questions as things happen. And so I want to be able to help people to, if they're in that spot or they can't figure out, maybe you just got divorced, maybe you lost your husband or significant other or whatever, or your job is gone now and you have to reinvent. So those are the things that I like to help people with, is just kind of jumping over that hurdle, that it's not as bad as it looks. Is there going to
Mm.
be work? Yeah. Is it going to hurt? Yeah, because you have to grow. Anytime you grow, there's growing pains, but it's not impossible.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value.
This message is brought to you by TogetherWeServed.com, a leading online community of over 2.3 million veterans. Launched in 2003 and run by veterans, TogetherWeServed.com provides its veteran members an easy way to stay connected and take pride in their service. Using its powerful search engine, veterans can find people they served with in the units, ships, bases, or squadrons they were assigned to and get in touch. Plus, a veteran's full military service history, from enlistment to separation, including all memories and associated photos, is preserved for posterity on their service profile. This history is also made available for free in beautifully illustrated presentations that can be shared, printed, or framed. If you served, visit TogetherWeServed.com.
Is there going to be work? Yeah. Is it going to hurt? Yeah, because you have to grow. Anytime you grow, there's growing pains, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, absolutely not. And the interesting thing you said, well, one of the interesting things you said, about 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, is it's always still 1 step forward.
Hmm.
So, how you manage that, how you handle it may not be at a pace you prefer, but it's a pace nonetheless that's moving forward, and that counts for a lot. But the hope that you brought up as well, I think there's only one way to instigate purpose, and I think it has to be grounded in hope, because
Hmm.
without that, it really doesn't matter the good you could do
Right.
because you don't see it or you don't
Hmm.
see it that way. And that changes a lot of things. Absolutely. But so, of all of the opportunities and of all of the things you had to work through, how do you think you came about to identifying those pivot points or the need to pivot? I mean, like you said, there's plenty of setbacks and mental and emotional and behavioral traumas that you have to work through. What do you think was a trigger for you that helped you to pivot?
I try to watch my first words, because our words matter. You know,
Mm,
I don't want to get all new agey or whatever. That's not what I'm about. But I believe that our words create our lives. And
Mhm.
so, we were talking earlier about how you have children, and I feel that if let's say a child is walking down the street and you're right behind them, and they
mhm,
trip over something and they fall. I used to work at kids' church at my church. And one thing that I learned is that if you get into a state of fear in front of that child, right, it makes whatever's going on with that kid worse than it is. It could be just the
Mhm.
smallest of scrapes, or it could be a big gash that you have to take them to the hospital for. How we react with them, getting down on their level and saying, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Let's figure out what we can do, instead of, I'm Italian. So first thing we do is probably scream, oh my God, And so I noticed that, that might not be the best way to handle the situation. And so it's okay to scream. It's okay to do that, but in certain situations, because we need our minds to accept what's happened, to speak life into it, even if it looks like death, because then there
Mhm.
isn't that. that closure that happens, kind of like that tightness of the belt to where, one of the worst words that our brains can hear is I can't, because as soon as it hears that, it stops,
Yeah.
and you've got the hypothalamus back there that believes anything that you tell it. It's just constantly listening. So whether it's good or it's bad, it's there and it's listening. And it's going to take what your mind is going to take, what you say, and try to bring reality to it, because it believes that what you just said is the truth. So it starts to find ways to make that happen, right? And so we need to be in that state of hope and not freak out when things happen. And I mean, I've had plenty of opportunities to freak out, and I
Yeah.
did. But I learned that, it doesn't help you or the situation if you just come from a place of fear and a place of hopelessness, because there's always someone there that can help you. There's always someone there. Like when I had my rollover where I was paralyzed, it was very early in the morning, and a few days later, because I lost control of the car, one of the wheels had fallen off. I didn't know it, and so the car was going side to
Oh.
side. And eventually, there was a song back then, because this was early 90s, I think. Yeah. And I love music. It was playing on the radio was Kyrie eleison, which is, I don't know if you know that, remember that song, but basically it's a Latin term
Mhm.
that means Lord have mercy, right? And so it's like, Lord have mercy on the road that I must travel. But now the Lord that the road that I'm traveling is like coming out from under me, And
Yeah.
and I remember thinking to myself, I can't control the car anymore. It's just going everywhere it wants. No matter how I turn the wheel, it seems to go in the opposite direction. And I'm listening to this song and I'm thinking to myself, this is interesting. And then I was like, I think I'm going to die, because
Yeah.
that's how bad the car was just going. And it was a big car, because I had borrowed my dad's Blazer just to put more stuff in the car to bring to my new apartment that was right next to my new job.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, I'm going to die. And I just closed my eyes. And then I remember hearing, let go of the wheel, because I was trying to control the situation. But when I let go of the wheel, what they told me, there was a guy behind me, who was he was a lawn keeper, and he had his own lawn business, so he was going somewhere early in the morning. And then there were two guys on the overpass where I was going. And so they told me how the car went back and forth and back and forth. And I was not wearing my seatbelt that day. And I'm glad that I wasn't, because when the car went up on the embankment, it hit a tree right in the driver's door, and it went in like this. And if I had my seatbelt on, my head would have been right there, and I would have
Mm.
been would have hit me right in the temple. So these are the things that I look at, and why did they happen, and not not to the point where you're like, why did this happen to me, or when you internalize things too much, that's not a good thing for us either. But just looking back and being grateful, is one of the things that helped me. So how can I get myself out? And just, as you go through things, there's never, you may feel like you're backed into a corner. That's one of the things that I learned, but we're never really backed into a corner, because there's always a way out, you know.
Mm.
Um, we may be
Well,
in
but
that mystery room.
right, sure.
We don't know where the door is, but I promise you there's more.
But even as a kid, you think that I mean,
Yeah,
obviously you got through that as well, but I mean,
yeah.
when you came to the States in the beginning, the language was different, the culture was different, the people were different, the customs, courtesies were different. That alone has to be overwhelming and, curious and frightening and everything all at once. How do you rationalize that when you really don't have one of your senses to try to reason through the situation?
School was very hard for me. So then coming home and being with my family,
Mhm.
helped me, because we all shared the same struggle. So we kind of helped each other out with those struggles,
Mm.
and would talk about the stuff that happened, which was a neat thing. And it became I had like two comfort zones, because now I'm integrating into the culture, but I'm also going back home with that culture. And so there was great things that were going on with that culture, and then other things happening in the other culture. So it's like you're between these two
Mm.
places, and they each have their sweet spot.
Yeah.
Um, and the household was loud, and I've never been a loud person with or without the brain injury, but the neat thing was there was a library literally right across the street. So I would like go to the library. I got to study or whatever. And that was my peace. So you look for places where you could find that peace. Hopefully it's in a healthy, in a healthy way, but there's always a place to, go to regroup. And I think there's a lot of things that a lot of resources that we have now that we didn't have before. And so there's a lot of resources out there to help us to get out of the funk that we're in. For me, it was either quiet or, sometimes those voices are so barraging with the doubt that, music is a big thing for me. And sometimes I turn that music on so loud that I can't even hear myself think, which is a good thing because vibrations, our bodies are, we're energy, we're light. And so there's that vibration there, right? Because doubt and unbelief and fear bring your vibration down. And so by increasing the vibration, it starts to build like the serotonin and the dopamine and the stuff that we need to change our moods. So I'm big on self-care, whether it's journaling, music, taking long walks, whatever it is that you need to take care of yourself, do that. I take a lot of like 5-minute timeouts,
Yeah.
Sometimes
Just to
it's
catch
10.
up and process and balance. Yeah.
Because thinking is a wonderful thing, and having a vision for your life, even if you're not sure what it is. I teach. I started teaching a couple years ago. Now, see, this is what happens once in a while. Vision board workshops, yes,
Sure.
and so just to give people hope that there's still life out there. And statistics show that people who have goals and write them down or have them up are people who succeed. I think it's like 80 to 90%. I think it was a
I heard
study
it's
done on
pretty high.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very high. It's very
Yeah.
high. It's like 90 something. But not only the ones that write them down, it's like a scale of increase. So those who have them and don't write them down, there's a percentage. Those who have them and do write them down is another percentage. The ones who, think, write, and then revisit, it's a higher percentage. And so the numbers keep going up the more you revisit those goals, because our minds see the image like we were talking about before, and then it tries to make itself into that image.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value.
Join us for Transacting Value, where we discuss practical applications of personal values every Monday at 9 a.m. on our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. and Sundays at noon on wreathsacrossamerica.org/radio.
The numbers keep going up the more you revisit those goals, because our minds see the image like we were talking about before, and then it tries to make itself into that image.
That's sort of the key then too, I suppose. You either come up with the image on your own, intuition or whatever creative spark applies,
Right.
or you find the inspiration somewhere in something else and then create or recreate something similar, right? So in gaining the inspiration for how you wanted to recover and how you wanted your life to be and what you want it to become, I mean, even now, where do you like you've become an inspiration for people and a way for people to gain a perspective that, no offense to your circumstances, but hopefully they don't have to go through.
Yeah.
And so, where do you find inspiration? Where do you get your vision from? What do you draw from?
Well, I draw from the Bible. That's my
Oh,
biggest inspiration, because there's so many stories of people that have overcome adversity. One of the
mm,
books that I wrote was about Esther, and she's one of the heroines that saved the Jewish people when they were in Babylonian captivity. And so she turned the fear of, her uncle Mordecai. They were she was taken into the harem. He was working for the king. He was one of the people at the palace. And so when they found out about this edict, which is a law, that the people were going to be, he said to her, how do you know if God didn't put you here in this place for such a time as this? And she was like, well, you don't understand. If I don't get called in by him calling me in, right, and I go in there by myself without being invited, I could die. That's a law. And so she decided she was going to fast. She was going to pray. She did that for 3 days. She asked him to do the same thing. And she put her fear aside and went forward and, made a plan that, she was going to tell him what was happening. And, she was accepted into the room. She wasn't killed, and she was able to, save her people. And so that moment of putting aside our fear, because for me, when I was laying in the hospital bed, right, it's like I had to go to the bathroom really bad when they took me to the hospital. And I remember the nurse saying to me, she put her hand on my shoulder, and I'm like, I really gotta pee.
Yeah.
And she goes, just like, as I hadn't told me anything yet, I'm on adrenaline, but I haven't tried to get up and walk yet, and so I'm not really feeling anything just yet. And so she put her hand on my shoulder and she said to me, she said, honey, she goes, I don't want to scare you. She goes, but you can't move a muscle because you're going to be completely paralyzed if you do. And I'm like, what do you mean completely? What are you talking about? And the funny thing is that God will, I choose it to call it God. You can call it the universe or whatever you want, but I feel like people come in at just the right time, and the first doctor that came in, he was like, oh, you're doing okay. You just got a few cuts or whatever. And, we're going to release you in a few minutes and you should be all right. Okay. So still on adrenaline, not feeling it much.
Yeah.
Just at the time that I was about to get up to like he said, you're going to be discharged, my brother comes walking through the room. He comes walking in, and the guy's like, okay, you can get up now and leave. And I tried to get up, and I could move my shoulders, and I can move my hands, but I can't move my legs, and I can't move my legs, my shoulders, and my whole body together. You know how you try to get out of bed and your whole body just kind of comes with you? That wasn't happening. And I was like this. And my brother was like, you get out of here and get another freaking doctor. Those his words, right? And you lay there until somebody else comes. So the guy left and he got another doctor. And they took me, because I hadn't even been x-rayed at that point. So when the x-ray came back, there was a vertebrae in the middle of my spine that had cracked all the way, like straight like this. And it had bent in, and the spinal cord was 1/8 of an inch from being severed. Good thing was, the break was clean and there were no fragments anywhere, right? And so I was flat on my hiney for months on end because they did not want to flip me over, because flipping me over would dip me, which would make the bone dip, which would cut the spinal cord. And so they didn't want to do surgery. They wanted me to lay flat. So here I am laying here, and I prayed a lot, and I did what I was talking about, where do I want to be? What do I want to be? And so I started envisioning myself walking, and I'm like, how do I make this happen? And then, I just felt like God saying to me how powerful my brain was, and that with my brain, I could start to, so the first thing I heard was tell your toes to wiggle. So I remember after eventually the toes started to wiggle. And then from there, it was like, doing your stretching with your feet back and forth, then circling my ankles, and then trying to lift my leg, which was really, really hard. That took a long time, but it just was a long process. But I kept seeing myself walking. I wasn't gonna, and even to the nurse, when, after they did the x-ray, and I told her, I says, I have to go to the bathroom. And she said that to me. And I said, well, maybe I shouldn't have had that second cup of coffee this morning, huh? And she started laughing, and, but, once they knew what was going on, then she was able to help me. But it was just a long process, and you have to sometimes go through that process. But the good thing is that we go through, so we get to the other side.
Man, it sounds to me like of all of these experiences you've had, you've been traveling into these unknown spaces,
Mm-hmm.
where at 7 you're figuring out, new culture, new you, and at 20 you're figuring out new job, new you, and then a
Mm-hmm.
few years later you're figuring out new you, and all of these things to try to relearn and reinvent. I mean, well, first off, congratulations. I assume that means you're walking now or able to
Yeah.
walk now?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's crazy in and itself. But then you write books now as well, which I guess it was a matter of time. Of all the thought and vision you put into this, it had to come out somewhere. So, okay, so you have one book?
I have 3 that I wrote myself, 2 that I edited for, they're 2 devotionals. And so 4 of them are Amazon bestsellers. So, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So
I,
now I'm teaching other people how to, that's another thing that we just took on after we
yeah.
did, my partner and I, we edited those 2 devotionals, and we were like, hey, we want to get other people just started coming out of the woodwork, for her and for me.
Wow.
Hey, can you help me write my book? And so now we're helping aspiring authors to get their words out. So
Good for
that's a new
you.
thing that we just added. Yeah. Because everybody has a story.
Absolutely. And there's something to be said for that because, I mean, think about it. Had you been able to go up or just think you could get up and go pee, you wouldn't have been able to help as many people as you have so far. And
Hmm.
indirectly, the amount of people that they've been able to reach based on their books, their stories.
Right.
Jeez. Okay. All right. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's ridiculous. Okay. So then now you, I assume, have some degree of gratitude that's carrying through all of these things, or you wouldn't be giving back to help other people and you'd be storing all that for yourself and the goodwill and whatever else. So, what, I guess, outlets do you have to communicate these things? Your story in your book,
Hmm.
and then obviously when you talk to people, but the unwritten things, the things you can't see, the intrinsic qualities, values, I suppose. How do you convey that to other people? Is it behavior? Is it conversation?
For me, it's gratitude is a big thing. I'm actually writing a thesis because I'm one thesis short of my MBA from
Hey, girl.
a business administry. It's a business and ministry degree program that I signed up for, and so it just kind of came across my lap. So I figured, okay, so I did everything, and now I just have this one piece. And writing a thesis is totally different than writing a book because yeah. But the topic I chose is how gratefulness and self-care bring about mental agility, and that mental agility
Mm,
helps us increases the dopamine and the serotonin in our brains, like I said before, and so
it's
that helps
interesting.
us be more successful. So
Gratitude. I'm sorry to cut you. You're saying gratitude, or your theory, I guess, is that,
self-care,
yeah,
self-care,
gratitude and self care help you be more
care.
mentally agile.
Yeah. Mhm.
How is that? What is your
Well,
theory?
because when you're in a state of gratefulness and you're taking care of yourself and you're exercising and journaling and doing these things that increase the rhythm in your body, then you're working at a different level mentally. So you're
Mm,
able to better make better decisions, you're able to see things more clearly because there's more focus. And so when something like this happens, it's not the end of the world, or when something happens, it's not the end of the world, because your mind is trained that there's hope. And one of the things that they told me is that I was very active when this accident happened, and I had just gotten my I don't know, it was one of my belts. I took kung fu with one of my friends. It was a thing that we thought we'd try. So and we were the only 2 girls in the class. And so when this happened, because I had been in that state of, keeping my spine straight, keeping my posture straight, you know, and I had a talk with my doctor about this, and he said, if you hadn't been doing X, Y, and Z, because I also did aerobics and I did weights. Nautilus was big at the time. I don't know if everybody remembers that,
yeah.
but so we were using the machines at the gym before our workouts and stuff, and so
Yeah.
that was strengthening my body and building up the muscles around the spine and in my, you know what I mean? So and even in my legs and everywhere else. And so
Yeah.
being in that state of fitness made things not be as, if you will.
Yeah. It is pretty wild. Sometimes, well, I think all the time, but let's just say sometimes for the sake of argument, that we don't know how what we're doing is going to set us up for some degree of success in the future to
Hmm.
live through some, you know, transition or crisis or excellence or whatever the outcome happens to be. But usually, at least, the more amazing instances to me are the ones where whatever we've been doing that we think is going to get us to point A actually helps us succeed through point B when we didn't even know that was a possibility, didn't even register on the radar.
Right.
For example, I think values are a shortcut to identity and conversation and relationship, even with yourself or with other people. And so this is a good point. This is a segment of the show called Developing Character.
Developing character.
It's two questions, as in depth and as vulnerable as you prefer to answer. It's up to you. But because of those things and your degree of self awareness you've built now, I'm curious about some of your values. And we've talked about gratitude and a few to this point, but specifically in the beginning, I mean, that had to start from somewhere. So, my
Mhm.
first question is, what were some of your values growing up or that you remember being exposed to?
Well, I grew up in a Christian household, and so God was always there. Um, it to a degree, right? And then when I was on my own as I got older, I did go through a time where, when these things happen to you in a row, where you've
Hmm.
consistently, every time it just seemed like every time I was trying to move forward, something stupid would happen. And it wasn't necessarily me doing it. Every single car accident that I've been in has been some person who was not paying attention, ran a stop sign, ran a light, got too close and ended up smashing into me, you know? And so you start to wonder, where is God?
Yeah.
But as time has gone by, and it's only been, like I said, the past few years where I really had to cling to that, because even when I had breast cancer, they don't let you stay in the hospital forever. I had major
Sure.
surgery, 10-hour surgery, and I got released like 2.5 days. You're in ICU for, then you're up and walking around, and
Jeez.
no grass growing under those feet, and so they make you go home, and I remember that night in bed, it was terrible. I mean, I had at least 125 or 30. I don't even remember how many stitches now, it may have been 150. I don't know. Anyway, my point is, we had my dad here. As I mentioned before, he was with us for quite a few months, and we ended up setting up a room for him because we had just moved here. We didn't know what we were going to do with that other room yet.
Yeah.
Because I want a library, but then I was like, I don't know, so we went back and forth, and then the back and forth ended because my dad came. So
Hmm.
here's your bed, here's your dresser, here's your little recliner. You could stay here, and if you don't want to watch TV with us, you could, be in your own room and what have you, and just try to make them feel at home. So that morning when I was lying in bed, I couldn't get up. I had no core. I had no upper body strength, and I remember I was like, God, why did they release me?
Yeah.
That bed was doing everything for me. Now I can't even roll over, get out of bed, go pee, whatever. And I remember I just heard in my head, you have a hospital bed in the other room. Go sit on the recliner. So
Mm.
what I remember from that time is being in that room where my dad passed. My husband's laying on the bed because he took FMLA, and he's taking care of me, and I'm in the chair. And then at night we were watching Christmas movies because my surgery was the beginning of December. And so those are the things I remember: is him sitting next to me, him making breakfast, him making the meals,
Mm.
him helping me, but resourcefulness. We're never without the things that we need to help us in that period of time. That's one thing that I've learned, is that the resources are already there, even if we don't think that they are.
Oh, yeah.
The resources are within us. They either come out of us or they come to us, but they're there. Um,
So
And I
true.
get the message out in whatever way, same thing. It comes to me. The resources are there. It's either word of mouth or Facebook or all of those
Yeah.
medias out there. I just started doing podcasts because I really felt like it's time to speak up. It's not a time to be quiet anymore.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value. Tampa Bay. Sun-kissed beaches, a thriving arts scene, and a community that embraces diversity. It's more than just a place to live. It's a lifestyle. At Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor, I understand that finding the right home is about more than just square footage. It's about finding the right character, culture, and community. It's about finding a place where you can truly belong. Alongside a network of experienced marketers, inspectors, realtors, and lenders, we're not just experts in the Tampa Bay market. We are your neighbors, and we're passionate about helping you find the perfect place to call home. Follow along on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor. Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor, where values start in the home.
I just started doing podcasts because I really felt like it's time to speak up. It's not a time to be quiet anymore.
I'm glad you started talking. I think your story is super cool. Mostly, though, to me, because you found something about you that you could stand on, not something about you that you didn't have to stand on. And
Mhm.
that's a powerful lesson, but it's difficult. It's not, at least in my experience, it's not something that you come by easily. It
No,
it takes work, effort, refinement, and then your vision shifts and changes. And then eventually you look back and you're like, well, actually, this is the whole thing that I've been building the whole time.
right.
Which it's very Bob Ross of you, if that means anything. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
I that's wild. Um, so let me ask you this then. And I guess for the sake of time, this is probably one of my last two questions. But of all of your experiences, then, and the resourcefulness that you've gained, and the self awareness that you've gained, like for you individually as a person, all the doubt and everything you had along the way, what now, looking back, has it all actually done for your own self worth?
Being an immigrant, when I was little, there was a lot of quietness because you
Mhm.
can't talk, right? I had hours at school where I couldn't talk because I don't know how to communicate with you. I don't know what to say to you. And even if I do say something to you, you're not going to understand that. So that led me to, a really quiet life. I just didn't think that my voice mattered. And I remember one time a whole bunch of us were hanging out, and then my sister and I and a couple of our guy friends were left, and I said something. I don't remember what it was. I don't even think it was important, but the point is that I opened my mouth to say something, and he said something like, "Go ahead and keep talking so we could talk over you." And he was kidding around, but I took that,
Yeah.
because people have been doing that my whole life, is talking over me. And so that's why I just kind of stayed to myself and never really said anything. But, now I'm older and I'm wiser, and I feel that wouldn't it be neat if there was a world where we could learn from other people who have gone before us and made those mistakes? Because then after a while, other people won't make their own mistakes because they'll learn from other people. They'll watch us and they'll see what we did. And, they'll wait before they do things, or they'll do things without being fearful in a moment that, we can't have fear right now because our life is on the line, right? I mean, maybe that's a little dramatic, but, just to be out there and just share what's happened so that people know that there's hope for whatever you're going through.
Well, I guess then let me be the first to formally welcome you to the new world. I think it's a pretty auspicious journey you started midlife,
Yeah.
but here we are again in a new pivot, I suppose.
Hmm.
So add that to your
Big
collection.
pivot for the
Yeah,
introvert over here.
yeah,
Because
yeah. Add this.
after I went back to work from my accident, I literally could go Monday through Friday. I would work, and then I wouldn't talk to anybody after I got home until it was time to go back to work on Monday. That's how great I am at being by myself.
Well, but again, if you didn't have those opportunities, imagine how much introspection you would have sacrificed.
Hmm.
So again, when you look back, like you said, there's a silver lining to all of it, even if you don't see it in the moment.
Correct.
Anne-Marie, for the amount of experience we've gotten, I feel like you should have been charging me for my time, because I,
Aw.
what you've been able to put into this conversation, and I think more importantly, what you are seemingly starting to find a way to communicate effectively as your story is extremely, extremely undervalued. I'm glad I found out about you and your story, and my team was able to get you on the show when we did, because now we have plenty of time to bring you back over the next few years and decades and hear what other kinds of cool things you've done and more of your voice. So, in the meantime, though, for anybody that wants to get in touch with you, track down your books, find out more about your stories at their own pace, on their own time, where do people go?
I have a website that has all of my books, and there's also a couple of free downloads. 10 key vital keys to go from surviving to thriving, and how to be empowered, in a business setting, like 5 keys to do that. So those
Mhm.
are free downloads that people can get. My books are on there. 31 Days to a Stable Christmas is like, 31 days of, how to be joyful, how to, things like that to help us through the holidays. Because for some people, it could be really toxic,
Yeah.
and, it's a hard time for a lot of people. So it's all on my website, which is wethriveatlife.com.
WeThriveAtLife.com. I'm noticing a trend.
Yeah.
There's a there's
Just a
a lot
tad.
of thriving going on in your life. And
Mhm.
again, I'm glad that it is, and I'm glad that you are. For everybody who's new to this show, depending on the player you're streaming this conversation or watching this conversation on, you can click see more, you can click show more, and then in the drop down description for this conversation, you will see links to wethriveatlife.com where you can track down Anne-Marie and find access to her books and more of her story and inspiration. I love what you're doing. I love
Thank
this conversation. I love your energy. It's it's super contagious. And then obviously your story is way, way intriguing. There's way too much to even tie into. But I'm glad we found a way to at least start. And
thank you.
next time, when you find yourself with an opportunity and a spare microphone, come back and we'll talk some more. But
Yes.
for now, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josh.
Absolutely. Everybody else who tuned into our conversation, thank you guys for hanging out, listening to us, entertaining Anne-Marie, letting her entertain you, whatever it was that worked for you this go around. And like I said, if you want to hear more of our conversations, you can go to transactingvaluepodcast.com. On our homepage, even on the top right side of the screen, you'll see a leave a voicemail button. Here's what that can do for you. 2 minutes of talk time, all yours. What can you do with it? Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of this conversation. And in my opinion, it's up to you, but more importantly, leave comments for Anne-Marie and we can forward them to her too. Let her know. Feedback, I think positive, constructive feedback is hard to come by in the world today. And like you said in the beginning, I suppose in a manner of speaking, gratitude begets gratitude, so on and so forth. So I know all of us would appreciate it. But until next time, that was Transacting Value.
Thank you to our show partners. And folks, thank you for tuning in and appreciating our value as we all grow through life together. To check out our other conversations, or even to contribute through feedback, follows, time, money, or talent, and to let us know what you think of the show, please leave a review on our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com. We also stream new episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time through all of your favorite podcasting platforms like Spotify, iHeart, and TuneIn. You can now hear Transacting Value on Reads Across America Radio. Head to readsacrossamerica.org/transactingvalue to sponsor a wreath and remember, honor, and teach the value of freedom for future generations. On behalf of our team and our global ambassadors, as you all strive to establish clarity and purpose, ensure social tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty or individual sovereignty of character for yourselves and your posterity, we will continue instigating self-worth, and we'll meet you there. Until next time, that was Transacting Value.